Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Catherine Kim and I'm the Business Development Associate at Pivotal Practices Consulting. Pivotal Practices Consulting specializes in supporting leaders and fostering workplaces that promote positivity as well as productivity. Our collaborative, strength-based, client-centric approach ensures that the solutions we deliver exceed expectations for meaningful and lasting change. Our engaging experience
Catherine?
and developmental programs support executives and leaders in addressing their most pressing challenges.
Catherine?
Yes.
You're fading in and out, so I just want to make sure everybody can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
So today we are presenting Writing ECQs presented by Corliss Jackson. Corliss has over 10 years of hands-on work experience at the Office of Personnel Management and at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. She left her GS-15 position to launch a consulting firm, Federal Job Results, which she heads as president and CEO. She is also the author of the Washington Post weekly federal jobs column, Corliss Corner. As such, she is committed to advising professionals who are in transition. Her experience working with the federal government as a senior program manager and now as a consultant gives her a unique insider's view of the federal hiring process. She utilizes this experience to translate her client's background into the special federal language and federal format required to gain the attention of the federal hiring staff. The personal attention and clients of Federal Job Results has resulted in tens of thousands of federal job seekers being able to submit applications that result in an extraordinary track record of interviews and federal job offers. Now, just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the question box or in the chat box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring that up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. Without further ado, we will turn it over to Corliss Jackson.
Thank you, Catherine. A lot of what you said was fading in and out, so can you just repeat the question portion so make sure everybody heard you?
Yes, of course. So for, excuse me, for the questions, you will see a chat box, and in the chat box, you would input your questions there, and I will pull it up throughout the presentation, and also we will have questions at the end.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, so today we're going to talk about ECQs, and I think for a lot of individuals who are looking at the SES, ECQs are really the biggest sticking point and the things that really cause the most anxiety for us as we think about preparing packages. So we're going to talk about what the ECQs are, what competencies are associated with them, and what you need to know to be successful. So first we're going to start with the SES. What is the Senior Executive Service? And I think probably most of you know a lot about this, but it was established about 50 years ago. And basically it's those individuals who are going to lead the government to produce results for the American people and to lead the government forward. The SES, each SES member needs to have very well-honed executive skills, and they really need to be interested in furthering public service. So it's important that you understand broad issues that affect the federal government, not only internally in a particular agency, but externally as well. There are about 75 agencies that employ SES members, and these are positions that are classified above the GS-15 or equivalent levels. The program itself, the SES service itself, is managed by the Office of Personnel Management, and OPM actually approves the candidates and provides agency oversight of any program activities. So a particular agency might have a candidate development program, and OPM would oversee that agency's candidate development program to develop internal candidates. All right, now let's talk about the application process itself. The traditional application process, which most of us are familiar with, entails writing those pesky ECQs, usually writing a set of technical qualifications, and these are directly related to the job itself. So if you were applying to an SES position in human resources, you would have a series of technical skills that are technical questions that are related to human resources. If you're applying for an IT position, you would have a series of technical qualifications that are related to IT. So it just kind of depends on which positions you're applying to. In addition, you would need a federal resume, which is a little bit different than the private sector. It's generally very detailed, and most agencies are looking for about a 5-page federal resume. Now, the second way that you can apply is by using your resume only. And generally what will happen is you'll see the announcement ask for a federal resume that needs to be 5 pages long, and usually they limit you to 5 pages. And I find that sometimes it's harder to write a resume only than to do the application the traditional way, because you're actually trying to combine 20, 30 years of history along with the executive core qualifications, which we're going to talk about next, into one document that's 5 pages long. And that can be a little bit challenging. The third way that you can apply is using something called an accomplishment record. And this is similar to ECQs, except that it's written a little bit differently, and there's different guidelines surrounding it. It's not used as often as the resume only in the traditional applications. Now, you will apply using USA Jobs. However, many times you will find that you will either upload documents or that you have to send your documents in some kind of other way. Maybe you have to email them or something like that. But you will use USA Jobs to find the announcements. The HR folks will review and rank the applications that are submitted, and then they will interview applicants, sometimes numerous times. So wouldn't be surprising to have 4 or 5 interviews. And then that package for that applicant that they select needs to have OPM approval. And so they will send the resume, the executive core qualifications over to OPM. OPM will not review the technical qualifications, just the ECQs. And once that applicant has been approved, there's a 1-year probationary period. And once that probationary period has been met, that applicant will be a member of the SES. And then there's different ranks within the SES. All right, poll question. We want to know what grade level you are right now in the federal government or its equivalent. So if you're GS 13, GS 14 or 15 or equivalent, or you're currently in the SES, give us an idea of where you are. All right. Okay, Catherine, we're going to go over those now, or?
Yes, I will end the polling in about 10 seconds.
Say that again?
I'll be ending the poll in 10 seconds.
Okay, beautiful. It's really hard to hear you. You're fading in and out, so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Beautiful.
So for the results, 100% of our attendees are in the grade 15 or equivalent level.
Beautiful, beautiful. So once you've been in a GS 15 for a year, that puts you in at least a year. That puts you in a really good position to move forward. Doesn't mean that you can't be in a 14 to move forward, but you at least have had that 1 year under your belt. And if you've had more, that's great as well. So hopefully you have some really good experience at the 15 level. Thank you, Catherine. All right, so let's get into ECQs, Executive Core Qualifications. And there's a lot of content here. So I'm hoping that when we go through this, it'll be clear, but just understand that there's a lot of information here. So let's talk about ECQs in general. They're basically the basis that OPM uses, the basis to determine whether or not you will be moved forward into the SES. So they are the deciding factor. Doesn't mean that your experience doesn't play a role, doesn't mean your resume doesn't play a role, but the ECQs really do play a strong role. So let me see. They are required for an SES position in most cases, not all the time, but if you're applying that traditional way, they're required for that announcement, or if you're applying to an SES candidate development program. There are 12 agencies in the federal government that offer candidate development programs. What these are 12 to 24 month programs that the agency who is sponsoring the program has to open up to other agency employees. So you may find that, for example, you're with EPA, but DHS has a candidate development program. They have to open it to you. And if you're a good candidate and you get through their process and you interview well and they select you, they will prepare you for the SES. And then any position for which you're qualified, you can apply to and get without going through the process of the OPM approval. You're already kind of pre-approved and you can be appointed non-competitively once you've gone through the candidate development program. They are offered sporadically at different agencies. In the past, let's say 6 months, EPA has done one, Social Security has done one, DHS has done one, Department of State has done one. And when I say done one, they have recruited for candidates, and then we'll go through the 12 to 24 month process with them. So keep your eyes open for them. They will show up in USA Jobs, and they're for status candidates only. All right. The biggest kind of challenge with ECQs is not that we don't possess them as GS-15s, it's that they have to be written in compliance with how OPM wants them written. And that's probably the biggest challenge, is that we have to prove certain things. All right, here are the 5 ECQs, and I'm sure you've seen these before: leading change, leading people, results-driven, business acumen, and building coalitions. So let's talk about each one of these and unpack them. First, let's go through a quick polling question. How many competencies do the 5 ECQs have in total? So out of the leading change, leading people, all the way through business, building coalitions, how many competencies are within all 5 of those ECQs?
Corliss, before I launch the polling, we do have a question.
Certainly.
So one of the attendees asked, I've been twice detailed into an SES position. Does that help streamline my application to an SES position?
It gives you great experience, but it doesn't give you any leverage into the SES, meaning you don't get to you don't get anything like from the candidate development program or anything like that. You get the experience, and I would definitely put it on your resume, and it can give you some leverage, but it doesn't give you anything in terms of being better qualified than the other candidates because you had the detail. The detail in itself gives you experience. It doesn't give you any other kind of credit in terms of moving forward.
Thank you. And I will be launching the second polling question right now.
Beautiful.
So our attendees have said, 50% of them have said that it's between 20 to 25, and the other half has said 26 or more.
All right, so this is actually a trick question. You're both kind of right, and both groups are kind of right. There's 22 competencies, so we're right about that. But there's also some foundational, or they call them fundamental competencies. And we're going to go over those as well. They do not need to be addressed in the ECQs, these fundamental competencies, but they do need to be addressed throughout your package. And these are things like written communication, meaning you submit a package, is it error-free and has it been proofread? Those kinds of things. Commitment to public service, that's a fundamental competency. So there's really about 28 competencies, but it just kind of depends on how you're looking at that. So you're both right, both groups are right. All right, so let's talk about leading change. This competency, this ECQ involves your ability to create strategic change within and outside of your organization. And it involves your ability to establish a vision, to kind of, you know, imagine what things could look like, and to bring other people to the point of understanding what your vision is and then wanting to implement it with you. And, you know, things are constantly changing. So this ECQ will definitely be one that you would implement in a changing environment, and how you kind of have dealt with those changes within the environment. The competencies around leading change are listed here. Let me see. Creativity and innovation. This is your ability to develop new insights, to question how things have been done historically or conventionally, to ensure that new ideas are being generated and that innovativeness is being used, and really to design and implement new or cutting edge programs and ways of doing things. So that's kind of the what you want to bring forth in terms of creativity and innovation. External awareness. This is how well you understand how current local, national, and international politics and policies and trends can affect your organization and shape the internal stakeholders' views. So how you're applying what's going on out there to your organization. It also involves your awareness of the impact of the external environment on how things are done within your agency. All right, the third, I don't know why this is going automatically, sorry about that. Flexibility is the third competency, and this is really just being open to new information, to being open to change, and being able to rapidly adapt as things change. So you're confronted with new information. How do you change how you're doing things based on this new information, or unexpected obstacles that you may have to confront? Resilience, dealing effectively with pressure and remaining optimistic and persistent even when there's adversity around. You know, change in administration recently, there's, you know, a lot of things that are being said, a lot of things that are being done, things are being done differently. How you recover from kind of setbacks that you've had, and how you bring your team to recover from these setbacks, really, really important. And these two are probably two of the most important competencies that they're looking for when I say they, OPM. Strategic thinking, and it's something that you definitely want to sprinkle through your resume as well, but formulating objectives and priorities, and then implementing plans that are consistent with long-term interests of the organization. And then making sure you're capitalizing on opportunities and managing risk along the way. Vision. This is really taking a long-term view and really building a shared vision with other people within your organization and maybe outside of your organization. You have to be a catalyst for organizational change, and you have to be able to explain what that's going to look like and how that's going to benefit others in the organization. And this is having vision. Translating that vision into action is what they're looking for. All right, so questions that you would probably want to ask yourself as we try to really articulate how we've been able to lead change. What was my vision? How did I operationalize it? What initiative did I take to bring that vision into fruition? How did I strategically initiate and implement change? How did I deal with unexpected obstacles? And then, did my vision achieve measurable results? Did they impact the organization? Very, very important, the results. And we're going to talk about how you can document these competencies after we talk about what the competencies are. All right, so leading people. This involves your ability to lead people towards meeting the organization's goals. It's actually a very simple ECQ, but it's one of the tougher ones to write about. Inherent in this ECQ is the ability to provide a workplace that fosters teamwork, working together, developing others, and managing conflict constructively. Doesn't mean there's not conflict, it means you're managing it in a way that's constructive. So let's talk about leading people. There's 4 competencies for leading people. Conflict management. This is really encouraging creative tension, encouraging differences of opinions, but the reason you're doing that is to get to a result that is positive for the organization. So maybe bringing about different types of information to the forefront, allow people to kind of play with it a little bit and have a tension around it, and identifying different ways, different opinions, but then ultimately moving the organization forward, okay? You want to avoid any kind of counterproductive confrontations, and that's important. So we're looking for conflict that is constructive. All right, leveraging diversity. This is a huge one. OPM loves to see examples of leveraging diversity, okay? This means fostering an inclusive workplace where diversity and individual differences are valued and leveraged. Oops. Why that's doing that? Valued, where differences are valued and leveraged to achieve the mission. And diversity does not just mean race. It could be gender. It could be age. It could be level of education. It could be the amount of time somebody's been on the job. So there's somebody that's just starting and someone who's been there for 30 years. That's a diversity issue. It could be a diversity issue. So leveraging all these differences towards making the organization better. If you can come up with a really good example of leveraging diversity, that's going to give you extra brownie points, because OPM really likes to see something dealing with diversity. All right, third is developing others, and this involves your ability to give individuals in your organization ongoing feedback, giving them opportunities to learn, both formally and informally, so through training or other methods. So if you set up programs, if you set up diversity programs, if you set up career development programs or anything, mentoring programs, something like that, show how you have created a workplace to support people moving forward in their careers. That's what they're looking for. And lastly, team building. Inspiring a team commitment, spirit, pride, trust, camaraderie, esprit de corps, facilitating communication and cooperation, and motivating the team members to accomplish group goals. Friendly competition within the office, that kind of thing. We're the underdogs here, we need to make a comeback, rallying the troops, that kind of thing is important when we're talking about team building. All right, questions for leading people. Talk about your largest staff. What's the largest staff I led? What challenges did I have in leading them? How did I lead my team through a challenge? How did I motivate my team to move forward and achieve goals? How do I contribute to the professional development of my employees? How did I deal with conflict? How did I leverage diversity? These are all questions that you probably want to ask yourself as you're trying to generate some ideas for how you might want to prove that you've led people. Okay? All right, moving right along. Results driven, the third ECQ. This involves your ability to meet goals, meet customer and stakeholder expectations. This is you making decisions that produce high quality results, even when you might not have all the data, you might not have all the information, but you're applying your technical skill and you're applying some problem solving skills. All right, results driven. Accountability. This is holding yourself and others accountable for high quality results. Setting priorities, delegating work, and accepting responsibility for mistake. And I'd like to talk a little bit about here holding yourself accountable. It's not just you holding your team accountable, it's you holding yourself accountable as well, and that's important. It also deals with compliance and complying with established control systems and rules. All right, customer service. Anticipating and meeting the needs of internal and external customers in order to deliver high quality products and services. So this is, how you're committed to continuous improvement, always thinking outside of the box and making sure that your customers are happy and that you're going above and beyond to meet their expectations. Decisiveness, your ability to make decisions even when you don't have all the information. Sometimes your decisions may produce unpleasant consequences, but you still got to make them for the good of the organization. So that's what we mean by decisiveness. Entrepreneurship, this is your ability to position the organization for future success. How do you do this? By identifying new opportunities, by maybe developing or improving your products or developing new services, but also tempering that with calculated risk, meaning your ability to make decisions and you're doing something new, but you're taking the risk factor into consideration to make sure that the organization can still move forward and that the risks don't outweigh the benefits. And lastly, problem solving. Pretty straightforward, but you want to talk about identifying and analyzing problems, weighing the relevance and the accuracy of your information. So sometimes we get bad data, and you need to make sure that you're weighing that the accuracy of that information with the decisions you're making. And then your ability to generate alternative solutions. So if A doesn't work, well, we'll move to B, if that makes sense. All right, so let's talk about some of the questions you might ask yourself. And again, these are just things that, food for thought, if you will, things that you might ask yourself that can help you generate some ideas about what you might want to write in your ECQs. How did the priorities and objectives I set lead to high quality results? How did I address my customers' needs? And how did my decisions impact the results? So this is all about you and how you're able to lead through problems. So identifying the problems and implementing solutions that improved overall the organization's ability to move forward. All right, ECQ 4, business acumen. This ECQ involves, it's pretty straightforward. It involves your ability to manage human, financial, and information resources strategically. And it's pretty straightforward. Inherent in this is the ability to manage these resources strategically. So it's a pretty straightforward ECQ. However, it can be one of the most difficult ones to write because sometimes we're in an organization where we have lots of people, lots of responsibility, but we might not manage our budget, or we might not plan our budget. And so the financial aspect is kind of, is not something that we have hands-on management of it. So it's important that you understand that this can be difficult, but if we think outside of the box, sometimes we can figure it out. All right, so financial management, what do we mean by that? Let's see. This is your understanding of how finances work in your organization. So what are the processes? Have you prepared, justified, and administered or implemented a budget? Do you oversee procurement or contracting activities so that you can get to certain results for your program? And have you monitored expenses and used kind of a cost-benefit way of thinking to set your priorities? And that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of financial management. Some of us haven't done this. We might have the program functions, but maybe we don't have our hands as much in the financial piece. But there's ways that you can talk about this. The Office of Personnel Management really likes you to be very strong in at least 2 of these. And they want 2 examples, which you'll see in a little bit. So if you can master 2 of these, you're probably in really good shape. Human capital management. This is your ability to manage a workforce based on the goals of the organization, the budget, and staffing needs. So, really being able to appropriately recruit, select, and reward employees based on what the organization needs, and your ability to address performance issues. And sometimes that's difficult, especially in the government environment. If you've managed a multi-sector workforce, so you've worked, you've had your fingers in different pots, and you've done maybe you've managed contracts and you've managed contractors and you've managed employees in a variety of work situations. That's something that you can leverage. Technology, this is your ability to use and leverage technology to create results, and really keeping up to date on what's going on and what you can use in the future to make your organization more efficient. All right, questions. Size of the budget, how much was it? How did I allocate and use resources, and what obstacles did I face? Do I have experience with a multi-sector workforce? And then how did I utilize technology to create or improve programs? All right, lastly, ECQ 5, building coalitions. This ECQ is really about your ability to bring individuals together from different entities. It could be other federal agencies, state, government, nonprofit, NGOs, foreign governments, international organizations, really to achieve a common goal. And this is your ability to use certain skills, which we'll see in the next screen, to bring those organizations together to create a synergy, if you will. Networking, partnering, and collaboration are key here. So partnering. This is ability for you to, this is the ability that you have to create networks and build alliances, to collaborate across boundaries and build relationships that can achieve common goals. Political savvy, this is your ability to identify external and internal politics, both sides of the fence really, and then act accordingly, because these politics definitely affect how these organizations will work together. And then lastly, and this is probably one of the biggest competencies here, is the influencing and negotiating. Your ability to persuade others and to build consensus. And maybe you are working with 3 entities and you have the same goal, but none of them agree on how to get there. So you sit down with each entity and you figure out how you can gain cooperation from each of these entities to move the project forward. That's what they mean by influencing and negotiating. All right, questions. What groups have I partnered with? How did I use my political savvy to influence? How did I bring the groups together? So, how were these groups selected? Were they chosen for me? Did I select them because they had certain characteristics? And then what challenges did I face when they got together? And then how is it that I actually do build coalitions? All right, so let's talk about the logistics of creating ECQs. And this is very important. So if you didn't listen to anything else, listen up here. All right, the full ECQ document cannot be longer than 10 pages. You can have less than 10, but you need to have at least 10. Most of the folks who write ECQs will write them till they're complete. They'll end up with maybe 10.5 pages, and then we'll figure out how to adjust margins a little bit, adjust font, adjust spacing, so that we can get to about 10 pages. I only say that because if you create an ECQ document and it's 5 pages long and you think you're done, you're probably missing the mark. So 10 pages should be your goal, and that's what I would look for. Each ECQ should have 2 examples. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Each ECQ should have 2 examples. Well, actually, let me talk about it now. So each ECQ should have 2 examples. One should be very strong and broad, meaning it's probably going to be about 3/4 of your response. The second example can be a lot shorter, okay? It doesn't have to be as broad, doesn't have to be as deep, but it still needs to be impactful, okay? So if we think about the ECQ document as being 10 pages long, and each ECQ has 2 examples, we're probably working with about 2 pages for each ECQ. And hopefully you're following me here. If you have 2 examples and one is stronger and longer, and one is a little bit maybe weaker and not as broad and deep, you're probably going to have about 1.5 pages written for the first ECQ, for the first example. and probably about half a page for the second example. And you should come up with about 2 pages. And if you multiply that times 5 ECQs, you'll end up with 10 pages. So that's really kind of what your target is. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but we're looking for the 10 pages, and this is the best way to kind of break that down. Your ECQs should not come from one example or one experience. They can come from one job, but they should not come from one project that you worked on. Each example should be from a different project, different, experience that you've had, because we want them to see that you've had broad experience. Remember, this is a leadership segment of the government. They want to see that you've been able to lead in different types of scenarios and situations. Your examples must be current. They prefer 5 to 7 years. You can go 5 to 7 years back. They will take up to 10 years back, but they will not be interested in reading something that happened in 2006. Okay, this is really important. I've worked with folks who were really instrumental in creating, the Department of Homeland Security when that was created, I think in 2002, 2003. And they did some really exciting things to create that agency, but you can't write about them in ECQ land because they're too old. They're 13, 14 years. They want to know that you have current leadership experience, okay? Each example that you select must show that you have significant depth and breadth of leadership. That's the ultimate goal, is that, each one of these ECQs really proves that you're a leader, all right? And then we definitely want to use the CCAR model, and I'm going to talk about that next. This is what OPM is really interested in seeing: context, challenge, action, result. You might have seen this model listed as challenge, context, action, result. It is the same thing. They do not care if it's context first or challenge first, but this is the model that you want to emulate. All right, so let's talk a little bit, about this model. The context is the backdrop. What is actually happening in the organization that is making things bad, or is making things not work well, or making things work in a way that you see a need for improvement? Okay, so that's really the backdrop. The challenge is what your particular task was, or what your particular challenge was, meaning you want the reader to know that there's something that you have to resolve based on the context. And that challenge is whatever you need to resolve. Now, the action, this is where probably about half of the entire example is going to be detailed in this action component. We want to know what you did, how you did it, and in what order, right? So first I blah, 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 blah. Second, I talked to the leadership team and made sure everybody was on board. Third, I did this. Fourth, I did this. And it's really a blow-by-blow description of what action you took, okay? The result is anything quantitative or qualitative, preferably quantitative, that we can say about what you did. So, you created 1 million more widgets, or you saved $1 billion, or you were able to improve efficiency by 2%, or somebody in another organization who was your customer said that they were able to do things 100% better because of the changes you made. Something that shows that there's an improvement. And it's really important that you have this result and that you figure out how to document that result. That's really, really important. All right. Okay. So let's talk about some recommendations. And Catherine, do we have any questions right now before I move on to this?
No, as of right now, we do not have any questions.
All right. So these are my recommendations to you. And I've probably written, 100 ECQ packages. And these are my recommendations just because of what I've gone through with individuals. First and foremost, you need to plan ahead. It's better that you find the time to write your ECQs before you find the job. The benefit of that is that you've written a well-prepared package, and you will not have to touch it again until you're maybe another 3 or 4 years down the road. The only time you'd ever have to touch your ECQs again is if you have an example that's beyond the 10-year mark and it's outdated. You might have to swap that example out. Other than that, once you've written your ECQs, they're done. You're good. You PDF them and you're done. Okay? Set aside enough time to write your ECQs. Whoops. I am so sorry. This is like doing its own thing here. Set enough time aside to write your ECQs. It can take anywhere from 20 to 40 hours to actually write these ECQs, and you need to be ready to do that, and you need to be able to set enough time aside that you can actually do that, and that you can focus on what you're writing. Because oftentimes people will say, you know what, this is going to be an easy task, and they might do one, do a little bit something here and there, and they might do you're not focused, you're not paying attention to what you're writing, and it's going to take you longer if you don't have that focus. But you can really assume that 20 to 40 hours is what it will take you to do these. It is not an easy task. It is something that is challenging for most people to do. It's hard sometimes, but you need to take it, break it down into bite-sized pieces. Thirdly, focus on your leadership skills. This is not about you managing a program or managing employees or anything like that. This is about you as a leader and how you're going to lead the federal government moving forward. So this is a big deal. And they're not looking for managers, they're looking for leaders, okay? And lastly, I can't tell you enough, you have to focus on what you did. This is not your team, this is not a group that you work with. This is I, and you have to take credit for what you did. And sometimes that's hard for us. And we write our package, and there's not a lot of information there about what you did as an individual. It's about what your team did. Well, you are the leader, you are the subject matter expert, and you led a team. You have to focus on the I and what I did. Very, very, very important. All right, Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating in our webinar. Corliss, if you can go to our next slide, please.
Mm-hmm. I think let me see. There we go. Okay.
So these are our upcoming webinars. These are the last 2 webinars we are going to have this year. So the first one is actually going to be next Thursday on lessons learned from project failure. And then the last one will be 10 strategies for effective leadership on October 26th. Thank you once again for joining us today. We'll see you next time.